Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C Podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. We are two men. I'm Jonathan Dunn. That's Chris Dow.
I am Chris Dow.
We're going around the world in 80 games, so...
That'll do.
Yeah. Here's a question. Do you like our podcast and want to show us some love and support? Follow-up question. Have you checked out our website, o3c.games? Follow-up question. Did you know you can support us by pledging a monthly donation via Patreon or a one-off donation via PayPal? Follow-up question. Did you know that sharing our social media posts goes an enormous way to helping support the podcast as well? We are at O3C Games on everything. Find us, share us, and if you are in a position to do so, give us some grubby money. Thank you.
Grubby and better.
Yeah, preferably. Just really like glove up, get your grub on. We're back. It's November. I hope you weren't all too tricked last night, and I hope that you were thoroughly treated by your Halloween's activities. We're going to be going to Indonesia. Would you believe it? What? Would you? But I didn't, but I had to, because that's what we're doing. We've got other stuff to talk about before we get to Indonesia, though, because we've been playing games for the last month. And you know what, Chris, I'm going to kick us off, because the biggest gaming aspect of my last month of gaming is the fact that the Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom landed on the Switch. But you're going to have to wait a little longer to hear about that, because my month has been largely spent on my brand new Anbernic RG35XXSP.
Well, hello.
Yeah. How did month's episode?
How did that come into your possession?
If you got last month's episode, you would have heard Chris waxing lyrical about Anbernic's lovely little GBA SP styled retro device, and because I was listening to him like a good little boy, I bought myself one, had it shipped to his house, had him set it up with his extraordinarily thoroughly crafted emulation collection. And you were absolutely right about this being exactly the sort of hardware needed for this sort of gaming. Yeah. I've enjoyed playing some of the retro collections on the Switch through Nintendo Switch Online stuff, and that felt like quite a nice fit, because the Switch is relatively lightweight, even though the Steam Deck can emulate beefier systems and games. This tiny little flippity floppity topped device has really filled a little hole in my gaming activity, and I just wanted to quickly cover a few of the games that I've blasted through in the last few weeks. What do you think my first port of call was?
Some sort of RPG from your youth.
Yeah, Rayman.
I would have been up there as second or third guess, I reckon.
It's such a comfort food game for me, and even though Saturn emulation is still an ongoing enigma to be truly solved, the Anbernic is more than capable of handling PS1 emulation. So I played through the PS1 version of Rayman 1 and had a wonderful time. There are actually a few incredibly subtle differences between PS1 and Saturn versions. There's a couple of audio visual things being a bit different. Some of the hidden electunes are slightly different. But by and large, this is the same experience, and it was great to play through it once again. And the nice thing about Rayman is that in order to unlock the final world and do the final boss, you need to have found all of the hidden electunes on the previous level. So you always get to beat the boss knowing you 100% of the game, which feels lovely.
Yeah.
Next up, Asterix on the Master System. I've spoken...
Bit of a curveball.
Well, sort of. I mean, I've spoken about my love of the Asterix books and also my love of the Asterix games. I just love Asterix. It's great. And this game in particular, which me and my brother had on our Master System when we were kids, there's a physical copy of it on my shelf behind me that actually belonged to my wife, in a startling display of synchronicity, because we found her copy of it when we were clearing out some of her stuff in her mum's attic. Me and my brother never completed it as kids, because as with lots of games of that era, it is tough as nails and pretty unforgiving. But with save states, to take the edge off, I wanted to give this a proper playthrough, and I was incredibly surprised at actually just how good this game is. For starters, the sprite work in Asterix is amazing for the 8-bit era. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find better looking sprites and animation in any game of that era. It's utterly gorgeous. The level designs are also really, really well designed, with a puzzle element to them as well as a standard, platforming and action elements. Most of the levels, you usually need to hunt down a key somewhere in the level to unlock the exit and continue. And this can see you finding hidden paths or different routes through the level to find it. You're always on a timer too, which even though it's pretty generous, like in Mario games, that the timer's usually there just to keep your overall score. But in Asterix, it called me out a few times when I was struggling to find the key in the level, and I was actually just running the clock down because I just couldn't find it. There are some really cool, fun mechanics in Asterix too, which just constantly surprised me. That they're not afraid of like throwing in new mechanics pretty late in the game as well, which is also part of the unforgiving nature of the game because you don't get many chances to learn how they work before you'd be killed and have to start the whole game again. And then I managed to beat the final chariot race level of the game, which is, again, just a stunning piece of sprite work. It's mad they did this on the Master System. I mean, yes, the frame rate gets shot to bits quite regularly when more than a couple of things are happening at once, but like the vision of this game is really excellent. And the best part is that you can actually play through the game in two totally different ways, depending on whether you choose to play a level as Asterix or as Obelix. And the levels themselves pretty much stay the same, but because of the difference in mechanics between the two goals, you have to play the levels then very, very differently. Like Obelix is taller, so he can't fit through small gaps, but he's got his powerful punch that can smash through blocks. Asterix is much smaller. He can go through like tighter little gaps. He also gets to carry around magic potions that he can then throw to have different effects in the game that can get rid of certain blocks or make platforms on like water and things like that. I'm really, really surprised at how much I love this game coming back to it. Like, it's a really, really good example of a Master System game that does hold up, unlike the shite box that is Alex Kidd in Miracle World. Shame on you.
We have a very poor connection today, just as a heads up.
We?
Yeah, like if I'm not reacting to funny jokes, it's because I may not have heard them.
That's fine. I'll just wait for the laugh. If it doesn't come, laugh.
I mean, but if it doesn't come, it could be that you're just sat there and I'm like, I'm waiting for this amazing punchline. I just literally have not heard it. So you might get a few like, ha ha ha. I'll do some Jimmy Carr ad-libs that you can just drop in later.
Brilliant. Okay. Next up, one of my favourite things about emulating games back in day was being able to change the speed settings at which I played them, especially as someone with a penchant for RPGs. Because older RPGs could be excruciatingly slow. And I'm not talking about like the pacing of the games or the narrative, but just the individual mechanics of walking, menus, battles, stuff like that would just feel so heavy and cumbersome. But with the speed settings, an easy option to toggle on and off in emulators, I just played through Pokemon Crystal on the Game Boy Color for a laugh. Like, all of it.
For a giggle.
Like like the in-game clock had me at about 50 hours, but it probably took me about 5 or 6 maybe to be all 8 Johto gyms, the Elite Four, go all the way through Kanto, all of those 8 gyms, redo the Elite Four, climb Mount Silver and beat Red. Like, absolutely, I mean, phenomenal game. I then refreshed my memory of Dragon Warrior Monsters, which was my other monster catching obsession on the Game Boy Color, which is it's a really brilliant twist on the formula with like an almost roguelike feel to the way you fight through procedurally generated environments, collecting monsters, breeding them, getting stronger, fighting through the increasing tiers of the tournaments, and just rinsing and repeating for days. But once I'd familiarised myself with mechanics again, I took the opportunity to play through Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, which I'd never played, actually. In fact, I've never actually played any of the subsequent Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest Monsters games. But I had a fantastic time playing through Dragon Warrior Monsters 2. It's a much more developed game than the first installment. It doesn't step things up in quite the same way that like Pokemon Crystal did over Pokemon Red and Blue. But there's certainly a grander scope to Dragon Warrior Monsters 2 with larger designed worlds to explore in addition to the smaller, more random dungeons. It's got a much more epic overarching story and a refinement of a few of the mechanics. 50 plus hours of in-game time, 2 evenings work. I had a brilliant time. I was then thrilled to see that there was a fan translation of the Japan-only GBA Dragon Quest Monsters that I could get cracking on straight away. But unfortunately, I actually just bounced off it quite hard. It's possible that I was just a bit Dragon Warrior Monstered out. But the mechanics in the GBA one, the little bit that I played felt just really too far removed from what I loved about the first 2 games. I might return to it at some point, or I might dust off my 3DS and play those entries, which includes a remake of Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, which we shall see. In the meantime, wanting to get my GBA monster catching kicks on, again, just for a laugh, played through Pokemon Emerald and then Pokemon Fire Red, clocking up about 60 odd hours of playtime in about 10 hours of real time. Pokemon Emerald is brilliant. I think the art design in these GBA games is so lovely, and I think stylistically they are the Pokemon games that actually hold up best. And I remember being a little underwhelmed with them graphically when they were originally released, because I think I had extraordinarily unrealistic expectations of what the GBA was actually capable of. But the level of detail in the pixel art is so nice. There's so many lovely little touches and just bright colours. It's just lovely to look at. I did really, really enjoy Pokemon Emerald. There is too much water in the game. That's an established fact. I think it would have been fine if the camera was maybe able to be zoomed further out so you could just see a bit more of where you were going, or as Minty posited a long time ago, instead of having long grass on the terrestrial sections in the water, you should have long water. Or deep water, just so you weren't perpetually plagued with random battles as you're trying to find your way around the big blue. But like, the only criticism I have of Emerald, certainly over the original Ruby and Sapphire games, or Sapphire in particular, is that it doesn't allow you to get Kyogre or Groudon until the post game, because I love Kyogre. Less fuss on Anthony Groudon, but Kyogre is one of my all-time favourite Pokemon. It is just a veritable one-man army for the Elite Four, and the post game in Emerald isn't. It's fine, but there wasn't really the impetus to really crack on with that. Pokemon Fire Red is a gorgeous recreation of the original games, complete with all of this gorgeous pixel art that brings the games to life in a way that they probably were in my mind when I was playing them as an 11-year-old. The main game's still really good fun. It's nicely paced and designed. The additional content in these remakes is really, really good too. And not just like the quality of life features and the extra mechanics and things like that, but now there's 7 islands to explore in the post game that contain all kinds of secrets and tough battles and all sorts of stuff. And then you get to re-challenge the Elite Four, who then all have much harder, higher level parties. And that's just a really, really great final challenge. So yeah, I had a great time. So much RPGing, so little time.
Yeah.
And in this perfect little flip-top handheld. I say the one thing I haven't ended up persisting with is the retro achievements integration with this whole emulator setup on my Anbernic SP. I love the idea of retro achievements, and I really, I had it turned on for my playthrough of Rayman and also Pokemon Crystal, and it was brilliant to be able to earn achievements in these games. Like, as a system, it just works so well. It really brings just a great new modernization to some of these games. But the issue I had is that because you have to be online to have the achievements trigger, and I pick up and put down my Anbernic just really frequently when I'm playing, that constant sleeping and waking the device basically puts me in offline mode too often. And then it's trying to reconnect, and I'd miss achievements, and that made me sad. So I decided just to turn off the integration for now, because I was getting frustrated that I wasn't clocking achievements when I was. And rather than getting wound up by it, I've just put it out of sight and out of mind for now. But all in all, I echo everything Chris said last month. The Anbernic RG35XXSP is just a really, really great little device. There's still a few hardware and software quirks with it, mostly to do with the battery and charging and that sort of stuff, which is a bit weird, but hopefully that might get ironed out. So some of it might get ironed out in firmware updates and whatnot. But yeah, I'm having a great time with it. So thank you to the emulation master over there for getting this going for me.
I'm really happy you've enjoyed it, because for a long time, I think like collectively, we've been looking for the way that's going to get you more invested and interested in kind of older games. So, we set it up on the Steam Deck. Years ago, we set up like a Vita for you to kind of have the same experience. We've had all these kind of different things where it's like, this could be it. This could be the one that's going to get you really, really into it. And it's taken just something a little bit different as the best way to make it work. But, I'm playing mine literally every day and have done pretty much since I got it. And that's on top of still obviously accessing the Steam Deck. I've got the PlayStation there, anything I need. But it does fulfill a very different kind of gaming niche and gaming hole. And it's just such a convenient little thing to know that I've got all this kind of retro stuff, all this kind of, PS1 and below emulation stuff is ready to go, set up nicely. There's my library. It's all kind of just, boot it up. Away you go for 50 hours of Pokemon in 10.
Yeah. Magic. Absolute magic.
I reckon you can probably guess what game I've been playing on mine.
Tetris.
It is Tetris. Like, I mean, I'd like to say that I'm getting bored of playing Tetris, but firstly, I'm not.
You know,
And secondly, even if I was, this last month, I physically have not been able to stop. And I promise I'm not just going to talk about Tetris for 20 minutes, but, you know, this is the section where we talk about gaming activity. And at the moment, a huge amount of it has been Tetris. There's just no way around it. So, context for the whole story, continuing the Tetris activity I had on the SP last month, I went on to beat SNES Tetris, I beat Virtual Boy Tetris, I beat a few pretty horrible homebrew implementations of Tetris as well, one on weird formats. And eventually, thinking what I was going to play next, I found myself back on one of the OGs that was NES Tetris. And this is the game they use in the classic Tetris Championships. It's kind of like the purest Tetris in a way. And it's a game that I had already mastered on Retro Achievements at some stage in the past. But over the ensuing years, it had extra goals and achievements added by the community, because you can kind of have like set revisions for kind of the achievement sets. All of the ones that have been added were related to the B mode. That's the one where your well is partly filled with garbage blocks, and then you're trying to clear 25 lines by either working through them or around them or whatever, just managing your stack. And I think I had 4 of those challenges left to conquer when I kind of re-picked up the game. All of them were connected just to beating runs on higher speed and higher garbage settings. And I kind of looked and thought, yeah, I can probably do that. And within 20 minutes, I'd beaten the one that was on speed 12, that was quite hard. I beat the one on speed 14. You know, once I was in the swing of it, not too bad. Speed 16, again, no problem. But the final achievement I had left, which was to beat speed 18 at height 3, took, without exaggerating, 45 hours of my life to beat. And you can't do that on fast forward. Like,
that's your next challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that 45 hours of attempts as well was often with runs that lasted less than 15 seconds between loading and failing. Just to kind of, you can do the rough maths on how many goes I had. But this was honestly like my Tetris Everest, because I was so transfixed on doing it. And every time I'd start and be like, come on, let's just get this done. And then I'd play for 3 hours, make no progress, and then just have to turn it off again. And it was like a compulsion I haven't felt since grinding out 5 stars on like expert songs on Guitar Hero or DJ Hero, or in my holistic obsession I had The Witness, that meant that I did not think about anything else for the duration I was playing that game. Like, I could not put Tetris down, and I couldn't pick up either the SP or a controller for my Steam Deck without finding myself just immediately booting up Tetris again. And I'd say to Georgia, like out loud, I'm going to do 3 more runs, 3 more goes. And then I'd physically count them down out loud, going like, right, number 3, no good. Okay, number 2, right, number 1. And then 45 minutes later, I'd still be going. It was like a borderline sickness, awful. Like, it took nearly 2 weeks to beat. And in that time, again, not exaggerating, I did not play any other games. Like, I put down the game for the night, go and get myself ready for bed. And then whilst doing my teeth, I'd find myself obsessively watching YouTube videos about how to master movement approaches at high speeds, or how, like, on the NES, people use these different things called delayed auto shift or hyper tapping, which are all like different ways to hold your controller to get just that tiny bit faster. When it was a work day, I'd get up half an hour earlier than normal to have a few goes before I left for work. Like, I was getting up at 5:30 rather than 6 a.m. to just have a few goes. And I cannot say that I enjoyed the grind, and yet simultaneously it felt like it was my only purpose and goal for that time. I've never considered myself to have any particularly neurodivergent traits, but I absolutely do fall into these pits of hyperfixation sometimes that I cannot get out of. So, like, this Tetris challenge obviously fits that bill. But also think back to things like the 50 or 60 hours I spent getting Deadly Premonition to work on the Steam Deck. When that episode went out, Georgia listened to it and she was like, you owned that game already on the Switch and you could have just played it there. And I was like, yeah.
That wasn't the game, though.
She was absolutely gobsmacked at that revelation for her, that it's like, so you wasted all that time to play a game that you could have just put in the console and enjoyed. And it's like, you know, that's just how it is sometimes. Anyway, for Tetris, I'm very glad this one is done. Of course, I'm already scouting for other Tetris games to beat, because the Tetraminos still offer a sort of safe space from the toughest bits of the academic calendar, especially when it's kind of work time. But thankfully, once I beat that challenge, I have been able to play some other stuff, because otherwise this would have been a very, very boring episode for people. And, that didn't look like it was going to be the case at the height of my mania when I was like, am I ever going to beat this? Am I ever going to play another game? There was one time I got down to just one line remaining of the 25. And she just said it was the most upset she's ever seen me. Because it was just like immediately I just dropped the controller and then it was just like head in hands. Not like anger.
And your parents have been on the brink of death.
I will qualify they are both okay, but that is absolutely right. That I've had some pretty low times, but maybe Tetris took it. Anyway, yeah, it's a game that I both love and hate, but it is a game that is thankfully done. It's done.
Ridiculous.
So, outside of your little handheld, what else have you been playing this month?
Well, it seems like forever ago that I finished Astro Bot, given just the breadth of other stuff I've played in the last month. But I just wanted to give a quick final verdict on the game. It's brilliant.
Easy peasy.
Really brilliant. It's really brilliant. It's got a certain magic to it that is often sorely lacking in big AAA third-party releases from Sony that tend to put their entire focus on photorealistic graphics, poor revealing motion capture, and a story that just really wants to be on the big screen. None of these things are bad things, obviously, and often make for an amazingly cinematic gaming experience. Like I recently booted up Ghost of Tsushima again to give it another go. It was like my third try, and it all looks and sounds amazing. It's got a really emotional, powerful, visceral story, but I just wasn't having fun. I just wasn't having fun with it.
It's not Astro Bot, is it?
It's not. It's fun, it seems, is the overriding priority in Astro Bot. It helps that it looks and sounds utterly stunning. It runs silkily satin smooth, even though they're intent on showing off just how many objects can be simultaneously animated and physically reactive. I witnessed one slight frame rate drop at one instance in the whole of my playtime, and that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
The sound design, character design, animation, the music, the dual sense feedback, haptics, trigger work, all just technically extraordinary. But it's the fact that Astro Bot is just so fun for the whole of its runtime that makes it so special. There are so many brilliant surprises and mechanics to discover that just made me grin so wide I was at risk of swallowing my ears. There's one level in particular that gave me so much glee, I was actually just giggling throughout the level. The boss fights in the game are great. Platforming challenges are superb, especially in these little contained X, circle, triangle, square challenge levels.
Yeah, they're good.
Now the content's being augmented with weekly drops of speedrun levels that are all just coming as free DLC. I haven't actually tried them yet, but I'm really looking forward to because it's brilliant. It's so good. The only thing that Astro Bot can be criticised for is not doing enough new stuff for the genre, but obviously it riffs heavily on 3D platform games that came before, but also just infusing it with so much originality, twists, ideas, and personality that it just makes it really, really stand out. It seems silly to criticize something for being, unless you're ripping something off shamelessly and not attempting to do anything new with it, just simply ripping something off so that you can sell it on, the iTunes store and just wait for a cease and desist from Nintendo. You can't criticize this game. I hope this continues to sell and sell and sell, so Sony really push this type of game development higher up their priority list, because it's absolutely outstanding. It really is. Are you all right over there? Playing anything other than Tetris, or do we need to call someone?
I have played some other stuff. I have. Astro Bot is one that I would have finished in a normal month, but I started that Tetris challenge basically when I was halfway through Astro Bot and then didn't touch it for 2 weeks and then just haven't found the right sort of afternoon to get back into it. But it's high up my list of things I want to go back and do. Hopefully it's not going to be one that I just forget about, because I was having a wonderful time. And I'm sure if I just am in the right headspace to sit down and play it, it won't take me many evenings to chip through the rest that I've got. Mm-hmm. And I love the speedrun stuff as well. Like when they added that to Astro's Playroom, that was a really nice treat before. Mm. The levels are so much fun just to blast through. To optimize a route feels really good in that game, and I'm sure it does in Astro Bot itself as well. But no, I have been playing something very different, something very not me, and it's been a while since I've talked about a game where the crux of my interest in Impress has been towards the community that have supported a project more than the original developers. But it does happen sometimes. Like if you think back to when I was talking about Clone Hero, when I brought up the Mario 64 decompilation and then subsequent kind of fan-made projects, remakes, whatever. Or I remember like talking to Minty about Doom and its modding community and stuff like that. Sometimes the community is as big and exciting as the original thing. And I've been playing, believe it or not, Final Fantasy VII on the Steam Deck. And whilst the quality of this game as an RPG that made the genre mainstream in a way that we hadn't really seen before, despite the big releases on the SNES, is undeniable, what I actually want to talk about is the suite of modification options available to modern players to make this a very fresh and easily accessible and pick-upable game through a hub known as Seventh Heaven that you can get for free online. If you own Final Fantasy VII on Steam, which I did from some point in the past, you can install Seventh Heaven via desktop mode on the Steam Deck, and then you can tweak basically every single pixel and system in the original game to make it either as modern or vanilla as you like. And this is not the work of one person. It's a repository of probably close to 100 different projects that address every aspect of presentation and gameplay in what is, we all know, a beloved entry in the Final Fantasy series. Lots of people really, really love it, and I've never played past the first hour. So, for whatever reason, I thought, I'm going to pick this up, I'm going to give it a go. I found a guide on the Steam forums that basically listed the optimum way of setting up the game through this kind of mod launcher through Seventh Heaven. And although it did take a good hour or so's work to install and configure everything for the first time, I've played it for like close to 10 hours now. It's been utterly smooth sailing past that initial window of tweaking. So you've got the game. You've then got new character models in the overworld, in battle, kind of across the whole thing. They've just been tarted up, resed, fixed, made to look a lot cleaner when you're playing at kind of a high resolution display. We've got crisp HD interface. We've got all the character icons and menus redone. We've got modern controller options and resolution settings. We've got updates to the active time battle system that make things a little bit more friendly to newcomers like me. You can have a permanent health display for enemies that you never had before. We've got properly upscaled pre-rendered backgrounds that have then been tweaked by hand to kind of iron out AI oddities. We've even got, and I don't even understand how some of this stuff is possible, the expansion of previously 4x3 art to native 16:9, like not stretched, just expanded. Yeah. And I assume in the same way, it's probably used kind of an AI tool to get started and then has been kind of rebuilt on top of what it's provided to kind of expand a scene. And every once in a while in these, there might be a slight clipping issue where it's like, oh, Cloud's got in front of an object where he should be behind. But they weren't part of the base game. So, if your sword occasionally pokes through a bit of the art, I'm not going to complain too hard because it's very impressive that it's been done at all. And they fit essentially perfectly in the game. For someone like me, especially who is not super au fait with any of the world that Final Fantasy VII takes place in, I just see a native widescreen presentation. It doesn't feel like a game that's just been hacked and stretched to feel widescreen. It just works as is. Even more impressive than that, the full motion video sequences that were originally, I think they ran at 15 frames per second in the PlayStation 1 game. They've been upscaled and interpolated to 30 frames per second for starters, which is like, okay, I know there's technology to do that kind of thing. But also, they've somehow been re-encoded to include the updated character models that Seventh Heaven allows you to apply in game. And I don't know if they're like being rendered on top of the video, or if they've somehow bounced the whole video out, re-glued them in frame by frame, and then put them back in. But either way, similar to the 69 backgrounds, not 100% perfect. Like there's sometimes a bit of strange character movement or like a little shimmer or something. But stepping back, it feels like witchcraft. It's something that this was not how it was. It is not how it's been in any of the remakes or remasters or whatever you call it that Square have been putting out, like on the Switch or more recently on kind of other platforms. But you can play the original Final Fantasy VII with all this stuff just working. And that's absolutely bananas to me, really. Like there's so much more I could have installed as well, but I opted to go without. So if you want a fully retranslated script, if you think the original was maybe not quite colloquial enough, didn't have the right kind of bounce to it, someone's redone that. Do you want a full fan voice acting? Like just, none of the characters are voiced in the original, but they can be if you want them to. Again, don't know about the quality of it, but it's there. The long and short of it is that if anyone wants to play the PC version of Final Fantasy VII in 2024, this is absolutely the way to do it, because you can go completely old school, almost completely vanilla with just a handful of tweaks and modernizations to make it run on a new machine. Or you can play what essentially is the remaster many always dreamed about as an alternative to the big budget remake that Square Enix is currently shipping in chunks. So if you want that experience, it's there. But if you want just the original game looking nicer and running better, that's there as well. I'm really enjoying my time with it as well. And I was quite surprised because, again, I'm not the RPG guy. I didn't think it would necessarily grab me. It's one of those games that's been a bit of a white whale, like Deadly Premonition, because I have started it 4 or 5 times in my life. Like on the Vita, I tried a few times and I just never made it more than like an hour or 2 in. And I'm much more invested this time and much further into the story than I found myself before. And I'm hopeful that I'll keep motivated to sort of pick away at this game in dribs and drabs. But as I said, my kudos and applause is not to Square, because they have plenty of plaudits for the PS1 era Final Fantasies in particular, but it's to this team at, Seventh Heaven, that group, all these contributors that just with nothing but passion for this game have ensured it remains a fresh and enticing proposition for anyone, potentially just infinitely into the future. The original game shipped on 3 PlayStation 1 discs, and I think I'm at the point now I've just wrapped up what would have been the end of disc 1. So as much as obviously playing on the PC, it's just a seamless experience. If I was having to swap out my black bottoms PS1 discs, I would be on disc 2 now. If I keep making headway, maybe I'll go into a bit more detail about the game itself, like the gameplay or writing or story or combat next month. But it's a game that's been done to death. I think it's actually quite boring to talk about because every podcast in the world, every kind of video games channel on YouTube has gone, oh, you know what game's really good? Final Fantasy VII. Even on this show, Minty had it as one of his top 100s. So you can go back and listen to that if you want someone to talk about it. For me, though, I was surprised how much I've enjoyed the game because I didn't think it would necessarily be for me. I'm even more surprised at how it just works in kind of modern day, just through people being interested and invested to keep it working and keep it working in a way that is better than it was when it came out, essentially.
Brilliant. I love seeing like that sort of effort. Like even just my brief dalliance with the fan translation of the GBA Dragon Warrior Monsters game. It's just like that, so much work. There's so much work. And people just did it, not for themselves, because the people that did it obviously understand Japanese.
Yeah.
So they're doing it just for everybody else.
Some of the fan translations that are hugely impressive as well was when you kind of read into how people have had to go about doing it. When I was younger, I kind of wrongly assumed it was just open up the file, find the word, type the new one. And obviously it's much more involved than that. But a lot of the time people are having to write a lot of the time people are having to write software tools to extract stuff from the game in the first place to then be able to translate it, parse it, edit it, check it, put it back in, and then make sure everything works with just endless playtesting as well. Like, it's a huge investment of time. And again, like you say, for people that could have played it themselves anyway, because 9 times out of 10, these are people who can speak Japanese went, wow, what a good game. Wouldn't it be nice if Chris and Jonathan could play that too?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really beautiful. That's a really, really lovely thing.
It is. And now people are so glad they can play Deadly Premonition on the Steam Deck if they want to.
I'm getting so many nice comments still on my Reddit post. Like almost daily, I get either little thumbs up or just someone going, "You absolute mad lad! Can't wait to give it a go." So I'm happy with that.
Good. You should be. You are one of the good ones. So I mean, I guess the biggest gaming news from the last month, or certainly the highest profile release, is the new Legend of Zelda game titled Echoes of Wisdom. Echoes of Wisdom. Echoes of Wisdom.
You can do that in post as well to really long it out.
Don't want to. Don't need to, mate. I'll be wasting my own time instead of everybody else's. This new top-down adventure. The new top-down adventure comes in part from Grezzo, who made the Link's Awakening remake on the Switch, and it contains the same toy box tilt-shifted aesthetic, but this brand new game is significantly larger in scope than the Game Boy blueprint of Link's Awakening, with a world that's apparently around 8 times bigger than Covalent Island, and in a massive shift to the formula of the series so far, sees Link being captured and the player being given control of Zelda to lead the charge in Link's rescue. The protagonist shift isn't the only thing to be a huge departure from other Zelda games, because the mechanics in this game are also totally different from Link's usual sword-wielding, arrow-shooting and bomb-chucking affairs from the other game. Instead, Zelda is given the Rod of Echoes, which allows her to capture the imprint of items and enemies from around the world to then summon at her behest. In exploration, this can look like building a bridge from beds to allow you to cross gaps, or summoning a trampoline to leap up a cliff, or conjuring a pot to hide in. In combat, you'll be summoning the echoes of enemies that you've beaten to fight on your behalf, and different enemies will be required to beat certain other enemies with different mechanics coming into play, such as, ranged enemies, elemental enemies, or which monsters might be best suited to the particular terrain. It's all very, very clever, and it's clearly taken a leaf out of Tears of the Kingdom's playbook in terms of injecting the top-down Zelda games with a similar degree of creativity.
Yeah.
It's interesting thinking about Echoes of Wisdom as a companion piece to Tears of the Kingdom, because like Link's Awakening was to A Link to the Past. Like Link's Awakening was like the handheld sort of companion to the big console experience of A Link to the Past. Echoes of Wisdom feels like the handheld companion piece to Tears of the Kingdom, but obviously they're pretty on the same console. But because of that, like it can aim lower in terms of its general scope and focus on doing fewer things really, really well. And it allows them then to try something a bit more left field within a tighter constraint of this established framework. I initially thought that these new mechanics in Echoes of Wisdom would get old quickly, especially in terms of combat. But like the devs have made this whole world based around the mechanics it's asking you to use. So you're never massively overrun with enemies or needing to do quick, intricate movements. It allows you to pace yourself and gives you, a bit of wiggle room to think about what approach might be the best one for that situation that you're in.
Yeah.
There is also another mechanic in the game that sees you take on sword fighter form as Zelda, which basically just transforms you into Link for a short period of time if you want to clear the room quickly, or you need like some extra to finish up a boss. You've got like I don't know what it's called, like a magic meter or an energy meter that it limits the use of this. So it is kind of a last resort type of thing, and you can't just be using it to get you through a dungeon if you want to maybe use some of that ability in the boss fight. But like it does feel a little bit like a get out of jail free card from the devs, possibly showing that like they didn't have complete faith in the Echoes mechanic alone. Maybe it's like it's similar to when games put in a double jump in it, when it's not like an essential mechanic. It's just like, I'm not sure if people are going to like this is a bit too hot. I don't know. I just let me do a double jump and then it'll just smooth out the edges,
Yeah.
But so it is a bit strange that it doesn't sort of go all in on that mechanic. And it does give you that little, like I said, little get out of jail free, but it's what it is. Echoes of Wisdom, it really is at its best when it's properly playing the Echoes mechanic strength, because as a creative puzzle-solving device, it did give me really familiar tingles of satisfaction like you get in Tears of the Kingdom, and it allows you to play through the game experimenting with different techniques to solve certain recurring problems, or stumbling across like a real surprise of how a certain item or enemy would work in a certain situation. It's for this reason that like the dungeons in Echoes of Wisdom are some of the most fun I've had in a Zelda game in a long, long time. Whilst Tears of the Kingdom is a phenomenal game in every respect, the dungeons didn't have like tight design that you're used to. You could use a lot of the mechanics in Tears of the Kingdom to, just exploit them a bit to cheese your way through the dungeons. And whilst that is fun, puzzle solving has always been a huge part of Zelda games, and like with Breath of the Wild, you get those puzzle solving kicks in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild in the shrines more than the dungeons. The dungeons are, something else really, but the puzzle solving dungeons in Echoes of Wisdom are honestly quite possibly series best. Absolutely brilliant.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
One of the things that was really lovely for my playthrough of Echoes of Wisdom is that my daughter, Nora, who is about to turn 4 in a couple of weeks' time, she really enjoyed watching me play the game. And it was just an absolute delight to sort of share it with her. At most days, she'd wake up and ask if I'd rescued Link yet. And it's just lovely. And when I unlocked something new in the game, like if I got like a new outfit for Zelda, or like when I found a horse you could ride on, stuff like that, I was like, I couldn't wait to show her because I knew she'd love it, and it was just really lovely. And also, she helped me with one of the stealth sections of the game, which I know like it's a bit of a dated mechanic having stealth sections, but like the nice thing about this is it gives you all these new mechanics to work in that environment. So it felt really, really fresh to sort of kind of go like, oh, remember this? Remember how annoying this was? But now you can do this. So, how are you going to do it? And I was actually struggling to get through this one section, and Nora just said, why don't you just make a pot to hide in? And that was exactly the right solution to this particular problem. I just had to make a pot, hide in it, and then like jump in the pot past like a guard's view. And then, it was just like, it's exactly it's exactly what I needed. It was just a wonderful moment for me. I was very, very proud. I think Echoes of Wisdom is at its best when it's owning what it is and not trying to be one of the other Zelda games. It feels like it's trying to split the difference between the traditional top-down Zelda games and the more open Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild entries. And it's not as successful when it comes to exploration in the game, which is a shame because the world is gorgeous. It's filled with great characters, really good writing as well, gorgeous locations, some great little mini dungeons, other cool stuff like that. But I think like the lack of immediacy with the combat means that you don't feel that sense of freedom that you can just dive into a situation. You can just sort of wing it, go anywhere, and just chop stuff down or take stuff on a whim, in the same way that you could in other Zelda games. But it also then puts stuff around the world that sort of makes you want to do that, but it never feels great. Like even when you get a horse to ride around on, which is if nothing else exceedingly adorable. But it doesn't help that the side quests in Echoes of Wisdom are a bit underwhelming. Like you never properly feel satisfied with exploring of your own free will because it's just a bit too clunky. And then it's also not massively satisfying when you're exploring to tick off a side quest. Like it never feels like properly rewarding. I mean, not like it's good, but it's not amazing.
Yeah,
there are frame rate issues with this game, which we obviously saw in Link's Awakening. They're back in abundance in Echoes of Wisdom, thanks obviously to the broader scale and ambition in this game. It's not the end of the world, but it's annoying when it sort of feels unnecessary because it's targeting 60 frames per second. And was it you were saying about how it's I don't know, like it's a type of processing where instead of like dropping from like 60, 59, 58 just goes, if it can't do 60, it then goes to 30. If it can't do 30, it then goes to 15.
It's in the past, games used to default more to just the screen would tear. You'd have that weird kind of like half image for a split second. And more games now have like a hard sync for vertical sync, so you don't get tearing. So you get a smoother image, but it means that when a frame rate drops, you're then essentially halving it every time because you've missed kind of the window to get the next frame on screen. So you have to wait for the next refresh, and it's not ideal. I think in more powerful consoles, you can kind of brute force your way through that. But the Switch, in whichever kind of implementation they're using there, it just means that as soon as you have a little blip that potentially would just drop it just a frame or two for a split second, then you get that hard drop down to 30 until it kind of builds itself back up again 5 seconds later, or however it kind of manifests in Echoes. But I'm sure it's a very frustrating thing because it was quite annoying in Link's Awakening, and I was I wasn't too bothered by it then because it was just like, oh, but it's just a fun little game, isn't it? But I think over time it's like more and more that I understand things a bit more and kind of how it's functioning. It makes you think like there was a solution there and you didn't take it. Like actively you've chosen not to take it. And that's the bit that I think is more annoying when it's like there was a way to sort this out. At the very least, the easiest solution would be cap it at 30, make it so that when the Switch 2 rolls around, it just uncaps itself. Like it would be that simple, and no one would whinge, and it would just be like 30, okay, and that would be it. That would be the end of the discussion, as opposed to instead of it going out and everyone being like, it's quite annoying. I see that lurching, jerky movement, but anyway, carry on.
I mean, you've covered about 6 things I was about to say. Like it's it's like the few sections that do run at 60 frames per second are really stunning. It's hope that it is something that gets a beefy patch for the Switch, for the Switch 2, the Nintendo Switch. Steve McLaren there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I never gets old. It would be great if it did get a beefy patch for Switch 2 to have it all running at 60, because like the aesthetic in this game is just stunning. It looks wonderful. It's great, just great design. Well, I'm talking about that as well. The soundtrack for Echoes of Wisdom is really fantastic. It's fully orchestrated. It's got like big tunes. sort of returning following like the more subtle minimalist scoring of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. The game sounds amazing. It's really brilliant. The main overworld theme has got some just lovely clarinet work in there, which I was not expecting, and a couple of the dungeon themes are just really cool. Yeah, it's a real treat for the ears. And because I was playing through it with Nora watching me, I played through actually most of the game on the TV, which is a real rarity for me on the Switch.
Yeah, it's quite uncommon, isn't it, for you?
But it's it was lovely. But all in all, Echoes of Wisdom is a brilliant game. And when it's really clicking, it feels like a total masterpiece. When it doesn't quite click, it still feels fine. But when you've got such benchmarks in this series that have come before, those adequate moments feel significantly less than adequate.
Yeah.
But like following on from like the DS Zelda games, which asked you to control the whole game via touchscreen, or Skyward Sword, which had you waggling your hands around for 40 hours, I did worry that like the echoes mechanic in Echoes of Wisdom could potentially feel like another gimmick-led Zelda game that's like, okay, that's great that you can do this, but just give me a proper Zelda game. But fortunately, it doesn't feel like that, and that is down to the brilliance of the puzzles and the dungeons. And even if the combat isn't as satisfying as other Zelda games, as a puzzle game, this is top tier stuff. Really, really good.
Well,
anything else
from something quite big? Essentially a AAA Nintendo release, even if it was developed by Grezzo. I'm going to talk about something very, very small on the Playdate. Now, firstly, big Playdate news. Panic finally got things sorted so that I and a whole bunch of other international console owners can actually buy things on the catalogue again. That was such an annoying thing that my card would be declined every time I tried to use it. And at first, they offered a soft fix where they emailed me to say, yeah, sorted, go for it, buy what you like. And yeah, that worked for certain purchases, but not others. Don't know why. But when I kicked it back to Panic, they were like, yeah, and then gave me no response again. So I just had to wait. But either way, whatever was flagging certain cards or certain inventory or whatever, it's now been fixed. I can now satiate my little cranky shopping sprees whenever I fancy. And that's a good thing because there's been a few higher profile or slightly more expensive games that I've got my eye on that I want to pick up or have kind of got on my wish list, as it were. There's a puzzle game called Spilled Mushrooms that even Georgia messaged me about that she'd seen it on another site recommended. And she was like, this seems up your street. And it was like, yeah, it's on the wish list, actually. But I'm looking forward to checking that out. There's another puzzle game called Poker Magic, which is kind of a bit more like a kind of dropping card game, sort of Tetris hybrid thing. There's a shoot 'em up called Void Blazers that looks very, very nice. There's a unbelievably nicely presented 3D train simulator game called 00 Perfect Stop. But all these they were just a bit out of my price range at the moment. I've had a heavy month for car repairs, which is always a laugh, but either way, I will pick them up in time. Instead, I picked up a very cheap Playdate release and one of the earliest Playdate releases, which I found kind of buried at the tail end of the catalogue shop shelf, the curiously titled Eyeland. And this is a bite-sized adventure game, no more than like an hour or so in length. And impressively, the whole thing was made in the browser development kit Pulp that Panic kind of, released for free for people to mess around with. My one-line review and basically reminder to myself is the classic adage, don't judge a book by its cover. It's a really boring kind of phrase, but when we first got our Playdates, I went mad buying and sideloading games from itch, and that was pre-catalogue. We didn't have as much kind of to choose from in terms of like the bigger names. But Eyeland would pop up again and again and again on itch, and every time I saw it, I'd shrug my shoulders and go, it's just a tech demo made in Pulp though, isn't it? It's just a stupid little game. And I never gave it a chance. And that's because, when you see a game made in Pulp, often there are sort of telltale signs. You've often got kind of flick screen stages without scrolling. You usually have grid-based movement. You often have tiny sprites that snap smoothly along kind of the invisible horizontal and vertical lines of the screen. You generally have monophonic music. There's nothing wrong with any of this stuff if used in the right way. But early doors, when the Playdate was still this thrilling new handheld prospect and we were talking about it every week, I wanted to see absurd 3D rendered characters, or I wanted to see wonky first-person shooters or grand strategy games failing to work on the console. I just wanted to see what it could do at its limits before I kind of went back to play something that, in my mind, was like, well, it's just like a Spectrum game, isn't it? That didn't seem like the thing I wanted to use the handheld for. But once more for those at the back, don't judge a book by its cover, because Eyeland has to be up there as one of the most effective uses of Pulp, first and foremost. Like the tile-based trappings are still there in its art and its movement. But this little adventure has such soul in its writing and its design and its art direction and music that within 5 minutes, you've forgotten its limitations and you can just sink totally into this cute little story. I know it's only an hour, but at no point during that play did I even consider getting up or taking a break or having a wee or anything like that. It was just like, I am all in. I'm going to play this till I finish it as soon as it kind of properly kicked off. As a setup, you are a weird little guy. You live on a weird little island. You are yearning for something new. And at the start of the game, all you can do is wander about.
Me.
At the start of the game, starring as Jonathan Dunn, you can just walk about, trigger little kind of captions and internal monologue dialogue when you approach different triggers or objects. And all you can really do is just go to sleep. But once you retire for the night, you wake up to find yourself in Eyeland, the titular Eyeland, presented with the cryptic message, "This dream, although fantastic, must end. Find your way through and out." And then you just spend 60 minutes or so pottering about, meeting weird characters, solving simple puzzles. It's very economical design. Despite being as truncated as it is, it put me in mind of the weirdly liminal and dreamier parts of Link's Awakening. So there's kind of a connection to what you just talked about with Echoes. It made me think of the modern kid-friendly surrealism of a show like Adventure Time, or that kind of art style, that kind of thinking. It even put me in mind, in a strange way, of Kentucky Route Zero, in the way it increasingly presents odd locations or events or characters without any particular fanfare. They're just there to be met and kind of absorbed. I alluded very briefly to its presentation, but it's really worth shouting out that as a first project, single designer Ron Lent, that's the guy who made this game, has done an astonishing job of painting a really, really rich world through text and image and sound. The audio is still using essentially like MIDI-esque capability of Pulp and the Playdate brilliantly. It's got lush ambient pieces sometimes. It's got nice chiptune foley, even nice chiptune foley as well. The pixel art intelligently inverts color where needed as well. So, on one screen, your character might be a little black blob with its little kind of, wandering about. And then in a different screen, if you need a black background, you're a little white blob. It's just, it works. It uses like errant pixels as well to create texture really nicely. So, a beach, you understand to be a beach, and a mountain, you understand to be a mountain, even though it's just a couple dots. And it also, despite Pulp having that kind of limit on these very, very small sprites, it will often combine lots of smaller sprites to create like a set piece character or event or something. And again, it just works really successfully. The writing flits between being powerfully silly and stirringly elegiac, I'd say. Probably best described as like flippantly poignant. So that when the game does finish, and I won't spoil any of it in case people want to pick it up, you will feel something. And that's an incredible achievement for what appears at first glance to be something that is just whimsical and throwaway. I can't praise it enough, really. Like, it's about $2, I think, on either the catalogue or via itch.io. It's easily one of my favourite Playdate experiences I've had in quite some time as well. Nice. Because for a long while I've been hooked on kind of like score chasing stuff, like Be Kind to Yourself and things like that I got really heavily invested in. But this is the first time in a while I've sat down and thought, I just want to play something that does have this little story. It's self-contained. I can beat it. I can get to the end and feel like I've had an experience with it. And it really, really delivers. So yeah, Eyeland, big recommend. And it's always nice to pick up the Playdate after a month or two and just remind yourself that it's a cool little device that does things differently. And the games are different, even if they're trying to kind of riff on established things. It feels different for the platform it's on. And that's a cool thing, I think.
Indonesia. You ever been there?
No. Although, as of this month, I now have a passport again. It's been a couple of years
I didn't know that.
Where my passport expired and I've been landlocked, as it were, to the miserable island of Great Britain. But now I can travel. So I can go to Indonesia tomorrow if money allowed.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to go there, do you want to go there armed with some facts about the country?
Of course.
Indonesia is the largest archipelago in the world. It is made up of more than 18,000 islands.
Jesus.
I know.
There's a lot of islands.
It is. And it's the fourth largest country in the world with a population of over 250 million people.
I didn't know that either.
Me neither. Indonesia is home to the largest gold mine in the world, the largest volcanic lake in the world, and the largest flower in the world only grows on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. The Rafflesia, I think it's called, can weigh up to 7 kilos, which is the equivalent of 50,000 daisies. So that's something. Speaking of flowers, the most odorous flower in the world also grows in Indonesia, which can grow upwards of 2 meters. And it releases a smell comparable to rotten meat that can be smelt
Oh,
for
boy.
up to half a mile away.
Christ. Just an
I
island
know,
of
right?
rotting meat.
It's not fun. And also, of course, it can only be known as gamelan music if it is modal-based compositions played on metallophones in the country of Indonesia. Otherwise, it should technically be known as sparkling bonging gongs.
It's good. It's good.
Games, Chris. What games of Indonesia? Tell us.
Well. After visiting France last month and being borderline assaulted by the sheer volume of games produced and developed in that country, it has been quite nice to have a slightly softer research task this month. But I always give it my all. Indonesia might not be a big player in the game industry, although from poking about, it seems like there's more activity here than in some of the other kind of developing markets that we've covered thus far. So I've grouped my research into kind of two pools. Smaller teams making primarily mobile games, and then mid-size and above teams now making kind of bigger waves in the indie space, because that seems to be kind of where most activity is. Mobile gaming is where it's at for many studios. This is often the case in kind of less established tech markets because the cost of entry, the cost of development is just that much lower than trying to kind of secure publishing for major consoles. Night Spade are a small team working out of Jakarta. They produced a mobile title named Nuclear Outrun, which from reviews seemed like it did okay a number of years back. Red Rain Games are another studio focusing mainly on mobile who have had minor hits with the Dictionary series, a weird portmanteau of dish and dictionary, if my pronunciation wasn't clear enough. These appear to be free-to-play soft RPGs with crafting, survival, cooking, combat, that sort of thing. Dragon Game Studio, again working on mobile platforms, pumped out a strange word game that may or may not have even been released in international markets, given its very Indonesian-centric theming, called Bali-fied. You know, something to check out if you're able to access kind of foreign markets on your iPhone. Moving over to a few better-known titles, the studio Uncut created the role-playing and management sim hybrid Valkyrian Arc Hero School Story, which is available on all current platforms and Steam. I think
title.
it's probably in my Switch collection, but I doubt I've even unwrapped it, but it is there. Stairway Games worked with Humble Games of Humble Bundle fame semi-recently to produce the Stardew Valley-inspired Coral Island, which reviewed quite well on launch and again is accessible across all major platforms. A company called Digital Happiness created and published the survival horror games Dread Out and its sequel, which I've definitely not played, but I definitely do own on Steam via some games bundle I picked up at some point in the last decade. Is that kind of lower tier sort of horror title that is often in a 10 for a quid sort of bundle. And the indie titles, or indie RPG titles, I should say, Potion Permit, Hitaria Fables, Le Grand Legacy, and Fallen Legion are all made in Indonesia by a range of software houses. You've got Mass Hive Media, Twin Hearts, Semisoft, and Mintsphere, respectively.
Semi-soft,
not semi-hard. It's a glass half-empty kind of thing. Finally, one of the biggest players in the Indonesian games industry is called Toge Productions. They've either directly produced or published a number of games from the country. The visual novel Coffee Talk and its sequel, the tactile puzzle game that I think you played at some point called When the Past Was Around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, lovely game.
The Infectinator series for mobile, the platformer Magicat, and the slice of life adventure game A Space for the Unbound were all from Toge. As a little addendum, bizarrely, a number of the games covered here have been published by UK team PQ. And we're talking Valkyrian Arc, Potion Permit, Hitaria Fables, Coffee Talk, Space for the Unbound, and maybe more as well. Now, I don't fully understand how this relationship came about or developed, but I do remember there being a bit of a hoo-ha a few years ago between Toge and PQ when it was alleged that PQ were misappropriating or withholding money that had been procured via like a diversity fund, essentially. Now, without any knowledge whatsoever of the details, I can't speculate very far, but it certainly suggests that the UK publisher may have seen financial incentive in working with foreign teams, maybe getting additional funding or tax breaks or whatever. I don't know, but, you know, the games themselves, we can talk about financials. Who cares? Anyway, of this small pool, what Indonesian game have you found yourself playing, Jonathan Dunn?
Rage in Peace.
Oh, I think that might be another Toge one that I didn't mention in my little roundup.
There we
I think
go.
they published it
There
or
we
developed
go.
it or something.
I don't know actually. Probably didn't. I was assuming that you were going to introduce it and tell me who made it. Rolling Glory Jam.
Well,
Yeah. Published by Togo.
okay.
There we go. Right. Let's do that again.
So I just introduced the whole thing again.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
anyway.
what of games in Indonesia?
Anyway, of this small pool, what Indonesian game have you found yourself playing?
I've been playing Rage in Peace, which is made by Rolling Glory Jam, which is a little indie studio in Indonesia.
Almost works. Almost.
Rage in Peace is a really curious little game that I know it came out of like a game jam session. Lots of games start out like that. And I find with games that usually have that origin, they kind of work as one-trick ponies built on one idea and then explored as fully as it can be. And that makes for lots of strange and quirky and wonderful games. Rage in Peace is very much this, because it's basically seeing how much it can invoke the compulsion to rage quit playing it.
Lovely.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
In Rage of Peace, you play as in Rage in Peace, you play as Timmy, who is an actuary, and it's about time someone shone a spotlight on that profession in gaming.
Yeah, underrepresented to this point.
Definitely. He's pretty miserable in his day-to-day life, but one day the Grim Reaper appears to tell him that that is his day to die. His only regret is that he won't get to die how he wants, which is at home in his pajamas. And the Grim Reaper allows him the chance to die how he wants by letting him go home. However, everything is going to try and kill him on his way home. And I mean everything. And it's your job to help him navigate his commute and avoid all of the deadly traps en route. This is basically the premise of the game. I guess Rage in Peace is a side-scroller. I wouldn't even call it a platform game. You can jump and double jump, but you're essentially just trying to run right and avoid obstacles. And I say avoid obstacles. That's not really the case, because this is the central conceit of the game, is you can never foresee the dangers that are ahead of you. Like a light fixture could fall on your head, or just spikes could just come out of a bit of the ground, or a shark may just jump it out of a puddle of water. There's no tells or signals as to where the next execution is coming from. And the game is then just asking you to just simply remember what happened before, and then try and avoid all the traps in a row to get to the next checkpoint and be one step closer to home and dying. It's infuriating. I'm not great at remembering details in games as it is. Something like, Rage in Peace just feels totally unwinnable to me. Like dying to the same traps in the same place over and over, eventually getting through a stage, it wasn't massively fun. But it does help that the presentation for this game is really quite brilliant, actually. The aesthetic and animation and design is just gorgeous. The writing is very, very clever. It's very witty. The soundtrack is fantastic. It's just really atmospheric. It's brilliant. They inject a fair amount of humor into into the game, in terms of all the different ways you die, and then the way it's written, and some of the little quirks and subversions and stuff like that. So it's not just plain annoying, but it's not what I would call fun. It's a
brutal review.
It says a lot that I died a lot more times playing the levels of something like Super Meat Boy than playing Rage in Peace, yet got annoyed significantly less frequently because I could see where I was going wrong. The mistakes I made were my fault, and I could try and do better next time. Whereas in Rage in Peace, even if you time your jumps right to avoid a few invisible traps in a row, there's no way of knowing what's coming next until you go forward and let it kill you. And it's strange, because in Dark Souls, the whole point of that game, and the whole point of the loop of the game, is you die, you learn, and you don't repeat your mistakes. That whole concept is tied into the story of the game, into the lore of the world, into sort of what it's making you experience. Whereas in Rage in Peace, more often than not, it feels like that kid coming up to you in the playground and punching you for no reason, just because it's funny.
Yeah.
And there are lots of things in the game, they're just designed to catch you out. Like the first puddle you find, you have to jump over because it's got a shark in it or something. And then you see another puddle and you think, okay, well, I won't chance it. I'll jump over this. And then just something will come down out of the ceiling and get you instead. It wants you to get annoyed, but purely, it seems, for the sake of seeing you get annoyed, not to unlock anything more inside the player than that. Like, you don't get the same satisfaction of completing a level in Rage and Peace as you do beating a boss in Dark Souls after you've learned the correct series of moves to use. I obviously haven't completed the game. Like, clearly the devs want you to rage quit. Clearly the devs want you to rage quit while playing it. Like, you get a little counter in the top corner of how many times you die. Like, it's taunting you, saying, oh, go on, rage quit. And I didn't rage quit at any point, even though I wasn't enjoying it. And certainly not in like the way I've done with games in the past, like say like Super Monkey Ball, where I was like frame out of like getting like a world record and I just like snap my GameCube controller in half. With Rage and Peace, I would just get annoyed, but more than it was just wasting my time.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder why a game would exist with its sole intention is just to make you stop playing it, like without anything more substantial in the game to teach you about that concept. Even though, like, I can appreciate the fact that it's doing something nice and atmospheric with the narrative and the presentation, but I can't imagine that any narrative revelation that would come my way at the end of the game would make me go, wow, I'm so glad I was annoyed for several hours to get to this point. So it's curious because it's beautifully made, and this is exactly the game that it wants to be. And I just don't like it.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't really know who it's for. Maybe it's, like those videos you'll get on TikTok of like somebody like pranking somebody and be like, whoa, and, like, and everyone's going, maybe
that's the audience. That's the target market.
Maybe just like stream. Well, the thing, I like watching those videos. They're funny, but like, it's like, maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't watch somebody playing this game and watching them get annoyed. Maybe I'd find it funny if I watched you play it. Actually, come to think of it.
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that.
I'm so sorry. I would take everything back. I totally understand who this game's for. This game is for me to watch you play it.
Yeah, Super Oathnange World 3.
That's it. That is it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's the revelation we're waiting for.
Yeah.
What did you play?
Something completely different, but a real success, I would say, in terms of intention and delivery. Really, really successful game. Coffee Talk, as I mentioned in my kind of lead up. It's a game I'd heard about. I just never got around to playing. Prior to getting set up for this episode, I had no idea it was from an Indonesian developer either. It's published by Togo Productions, but it's pretty much single-handedly developed by a chap named Mohammed Fahmy. He sadly passed away tragically young just a couple of years ago, which is a real shame because it's clear from this that he was, a very, very talented young man. Coffee Talk is a visual novel set, as the name suggests, in a coffee shop. The narrative catch is that this coffee shop only opens at night, and all the denizens of the Seattle that are shown here are all of different fantasy races. So you've got humans and orcs and elves and succubi and aliens and werewolves and vampires, but all existent in a real-world contemporary setting, a la kind of What We Do in the Shadows or something like that. The difference here, to that show at least, is that all of these races intermingle and coexist. There's no proverbial shadows. Everyone is out and proud as the race they are within this kind of fantasy world, which is actually not a fantasy world in that sense. It's a regular kind of Earth that just happens to have all these different kind of things knocking about and coexisting. To give an overview of how Coffee Talk plays, the game has you reading conversations and watching interactions between coffee shop patrons, mixing drinks to order, and then absorbing kind of wider world building through newspaper headlines. The drinks mixing interface as the primary input that you have as a player is simple, but it asks that you do pay attention to clues in customer speech or requests to ensure you're kind of mixing the right beverages. You're not overly punished for mixing the wrong drinks, but success does feed into some of the wider flavour text you can unlock via the game's Facebook-style social media pages that get increasingly populated with backstory for these characters as your relationship with them improves. So it is worth trying to do well if you're enjoying getting to know these characters. There's more for you if you get good at mixing the right kind of cafe latte. I'm not a barista, as you can probably tell. As a recurring caveat, any time a visual novel comes up on this show, if you're not into the core idea of the game being primarily linear and narrative-based, you won't have a good time here. But if you're open to the experience, then the game is a super, super success, like I mentioned. it works for me for a similar reason that Bloom on the Playdate was such a success, because not only does it have really good writing, but it's got writing that is broken up just enough by some sort of activity input. So I don't fundamentally have a problem with straight kinetic novels that are just text. But of the limited visual novels I've played, my favourites have always been something that's got a bit of contrast as well. So like the gardening in Bloom, or the escape rooms of 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. So something that kind of breaks it up. And Coffee Talk is simple, but it's paced really well. And the game really seems to know when you're likely to be kind of like getting bored or losing interest in a conversation. And then we'll either wrap it up to give you new people to speak to, new things to happen, or kind of giving you a quick break as you try to mix up a special drink. So you're just kind of pulled out of it for a moment to think, okay, what did they say? What do I need to do? And it just keeps you kind of motivated and connected to what's going on. The drinks are also one of the keys into this being an incredibly inclusive and very globally minded game, because all the drinks you mix are real, or at least simplified ingredient versions of real drinks. And so you'll be brewing coffees and teas that are native to all regions. So masala chai, or a Marrakesh green tea, or a Shayadini from Yemen, or an STMJ from Indonesia. And they're all strange, at least to my taste. The STMJ is a brew of milk, egg, honey, and ginger, I researched after. But for all these things, they exist in the world. They exist in the real world. So if you want a nice eggy drink, Indonesia is the place to go and have a delicious milky, eggy tea drink. The cast of this game is the real star, though. The characters are fantastic. So you've got a whole range. You've got human Freya, who perches in the coffee shop, earwigging on conversations to try and fuel the slice of life novel that she's writing. You've got an unlikely friendship between Gala the werewolf, who works in hospital admin. It's a very boring job and a very exciting character, but that's how it's set up. And his pals with this vampire model called Hyde. Or you've got a Romeo and Juliet adjacent romance between an elf called Bailey and his succubus partner called Lua. And there's kind of things they're navigating between themselves because of a difference in race and kind of families not kind of getting on or not appreciating kind of the relationship they have. What makes the narrative of the game work is not the mix of races present, but rather the way that the fantasy archetypes are used to tell real-life human stories. So it can be quite a heavy game. You've got characters that are struggling with relationships, characters that are struggling with their own kind of mental health. They're navigating issues of gender and sexuality. Some are fumbling through parental responsibilities towards kind of their younger children, or some just reflecting on kind of their own kind of self-acceptance or purpose or what they should be doing in the world. And as much as it's able to use these characters to occasionally lean into a fancy stereotype about elves or orcs or something for a joke, every line is written with real love. And when I first realised this was a game created by an Indonesian developer, I felt a bit worried that the dialogue may not translate as smoothly as I would have liked, because I've read novels in the past by authors like Murakami, where the sentence syntax just suffered from moving from Japanese to English. And I found it quite hard to read because it felt very kind of staid and truncated, which maybe flowed much different if it was in its native language. But I needn't have worried. Coffee Talk is really thoughtfully presented, and outside of characters sometimes addressing one another quite formally, which might be kind of an Indonesian thing, I'm not sure. It's the equivalent of me always referring to you as Mr. Jonathan, or to my partner here as Miss Georgia. It feels quite conversational. So everything else outside of addressing each other is it feels good. The cast, as I said, it's really varied. Every character has their own kind of issues that they're dealing with, their own agency, but they also play their role alongside the other customers really well as well. So they might become heated in conversation when another patron kind of pushes their buttons in some way about some topic. They might seem downtrodden if you fluff their drink order. They might show a playful side, kind of making fun of or jabbing at other characters when they've kind of started to become more pally. And they just feel surprisingly real because they've all got more texture and depth than you'd expect just for being like a fantasy archetype. The presentation outside of the writing is top notch too. The pixel art here is fantastic. It's got huge, detailed characters that emote to reflect their dialogue. There's tons of incidental details like the silhouettes that pass outside the windows of the coffee shop in the background, or the way that each character has a distinctly different phone that they place on the bar top whilst enjoying their drinks. And anytime they get kind of a text or a notification, your pad in your hand will rumble, to show what's going on, and you don't get to read their text, but it just grounds you in the world a bit more, that it's like, oh, I felt a buzz because I can see their phone flashing. It's a real nice little thing. It's just a very incidental detail, and it's really successful. The music is what I'd now shorthand as lo-fi beats to study/relax to. But
love it.
It fits the vibe perfectly. It's inoffensive so as not to distract. but it works for kind of the narrative at hand. It's meant to be background music for a coffee shop, and it works in that context. Researching this game, someone had referred to it as capturing the idea of sonder, a word I've never heard before, but it was described as the profound feeling of realizing that everyone, including strangers passing in the street, has a life as complex as one's own. And that's a really lovely way of thinking about how these characters are interacting. I've personally thought about, my life. It's essentially everyone around me. It's like a series of lines that are occasionally intersecting and crossing over. And at those points, you suddenly realize that there's more going on at the same time. These parallel lines can close and touch and everything else. And I guess Sonder is a more expanded concept of that. It's just saying that, people are existent in the world, even if we don't always realize that or don't really think about it. But I think it's absolutely right that Coffee Talk is recognized for capturing that vibe, because the characters are flitting in and out of the barista's life. Some are guarded, some overshare, but all give the impression that they are existing and dealing with their own challenges or traumas or successes or whatever outside of just your interactions. There's things happening between the time that you are seeing them. It's not just we save up all the kind of the narrative dump for when we're sat in front of you enjoying a coffee. It's like their lives are happening, and then you're just catching the tail end of it when they pop in a week later. It's a really good video game. It did get a sequel in 2023. It also reviewed really well. Yet to play that one. Sadly, the developer was not alive to see that release. I'd assume the series was now on hiatus unless Toge wants to pass the torch to a new team or writer, but it might be enough just to enjoy what's here. And I would say, honestly, this is our 12th episode now in this series. This might be one of my favourites from our Globetrotting series so far in terms of new discoveries, because I enjoyed it way more than I was anticipating, and it just ticks a lot of boxes I didn't know I kind of necessarily wanted in a narrative story-driven game. So yeah, really, really good. Coffee Talk is a really solid recommendation if you are up for having a bit of a read and mixing the odd drink to break up your reading.
It looks really lovely. It's supported on Mac as well, so I could have it on my second monitor while I'm working and just have them keeping me company, reading a bit, enjoying the lo-fi beats.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it works really well as well because each kind of in-game day normally has a mini narrative that will kind of wrap itself up or at least kind of get to a punctuation point. And they're never longer than, say, 15, 20 minutes at the most for each little chunk. So you can kind of know that you're never going to have to wait too long for a proper point where you can save and leave it and come back to it later. So the pacing of the whole thing is really well considered. But definitely, I would say for anyone that enjoyed Bloom, especially as we both did, I'd say this is one to recommend and one to play. I really, really enjoyed it.
On my wish list.
There we go.
Do you want to know where we're going next?
I do. Yes, this is your choice. Where are we headed next month?
Have a guess.
I think it's going to be a different continent. I think we're going to Canada. We haven't done Canada yet, have we?
No, we have not. And that's not where we're going. We're going to Spain.
Yeah, where are we going then?
I'm really excited to go to Spain. They're somewhat of a more recent kind of gaming scene developers. I think I'm really excited to go to Spain. I know that there's some really, really good stuff there, including the new game from the developers of Gris, which I'm shotgunning.
Yeah,
I'm playing
Spanish. Fuck off.
So you got to play. You got to play commandos behind enemy lines.
Is it Spanish?
Yeah, apparently.
Fine. Might play it.
Yeah, dude. Supported on Steam Deck. I'll say that.
You leave it with me.
I don't think it is actually. I'll have a look to see if it is actually. It is unsupported on Steam Deck. So yeah, leave that there.
Here we go.
There we go. That was Indonesia. I hope you've enjoyed that. Really enjoyed thinking about Rage in Peace more than I enjoyed the game, but I enjoyed hearing you think and talk about Coffee Talk, and I really want to play that. So yeah, well done, Indonesia. Yeah. If you want to help support us, please do. O3C.games. Go to our support page. You can chuck us some money. You can share us on social media. You can join us on the Discord. Do all of those things, or one of those things. Your choice. We are at O3C Games on all social media. Follow us. Look at our stuff. Share our stuff. Tell a friend about it. Do one of those things. And next month, 1st of December. Shit.
Christmas
in Spain.
Spanish Christmas.
Spishmas.
Just end on that.
Yeah.